Hey guys, so today we're going to focus on building a basic hill, one of the most basic things you're going to want on your table that'll keep it from being just a bland gray or green surface. So we're going to go over the tools we need and what you're going to want to have on hand just to put something together basically. This isn't going to be anything fancy, but hopefully it'll keep your surface from being completely blank and boring and dull. So we're going to go over those tools, and this is what you're going to need. First off, what we're going to want to focus on is I use this pink insulation foam. You can get it at any home store, a Home Depot or Lowe's and the like. What you want to do is just make sure you avoid the 2x2 project panels and go for the big 2x2, 2x8 foot panels. Those are going to be your best value. They're good, they're solid. You'll never need more than one of these, so don't worry about it too much. The next thing you're going to want to have on hand is a piece of cardboard. The reason for that is you're going to want a good surface to cut on, whether you're using a hard table like this or a dining table or your gaming table. You don't want to gash into it when you're making your cuts. The next thing you're going to want to have on hand is a pen or a Sharpie, just because you're going to use that to make your basic trace outlines. I do recommend a box cutter also for doing your cuts, or one of these large extended blades. The reason for that is these can go nice and deep. They can cut through your thicker layers of that foam. Just make sure you're careful with these because they can get sharp, they can break. So you just want to be careful with them. The other alternative is a floral cutter. The thing about these, you want to make sure that wire keeps nice and clean. They are battery powered, so you do want to make sure you have batteries. Other than that, they're pretty good because they do cut through these like butter. I will kind of show you how to use that when we get to work in that project. You just want to make sure that wire is. So moving on, what we're going to now focus on is kind of the finishing things when it comes to those tools, and this is what you're going to want to keep it from being a pink slab. So you're going to want some basic green craft paint. This stuff is pretty cheap. You don't need to be fancy with it. I like to give it a base coat and then give it a quick rattle can spray. You want to make sure you give it that base coat though, because spray paint will eat through this pink foam. Just make sure you paint the side that doesn't have the print on it, because it will make it a little bit easier. Moving on, cheap craft brush, and of course something to put your paint into. Like I said, this tutorial we're going to go through the entire thing, so make sure your bowl is clean, and a little bit of finishing sandpaper, just because this is the part where when you get to that finishing point you're going to need it. The last thing is to get to it. So going with the little floral cutter, I'm going to show you why some people like it in just a bit. So the first thing we want to do is take our Sharpie. What we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to move to the non-printed side, make sure it's nice and clean. That printed side is going to be paint to paint, so we don't want to use that, and kind of give your hill its rough outline. The more organic of a shape, the better it's going to look, but there's nothing stopping you from making perfect circles. So once again, give it a nice, make sure it's nice and clean. Let's grab our little floral cutter just so I can show you the type of clean line it makes. So once it's on and it's heated, you'll notice it does kind of cut through. You do want to make sure that you go nice and slow, because if you go too hard, that wire can snap. So just be patient with it. You'll notice when it gets all the way through, depending on the motion you make, it's going to give that side of the hill a bit of a texture. You can see right there. Let me just pull this piece off. Make sure you always turn this bad boy off when you're not using it. One, because it can burn you. Two, because it does get pretty hot. So we're going to use the basic box cutter because this is the thing everybody has to finish it up. So kind of go along that circle you made. Just make sure you get in there nice and deep. Use some pressure. And once again, that line is more of a guide than it is a rule, so to speak. So do your best to follow it, but it's not necessary. It does take a bit of effort sometimes. That's why I kind of like the floral cutter. Floral cutter goes through it. Try to get all the way through. Otherwise, when you're done cutting, you're going to need a little bit of effort to snap. Thankfully, it will just snap off. As you can see right here. Oh, I'm so weak. Then you feel like a winner when you snap it off. And it comes off pretty clean. If you can go all the way through, you don't really have this problem. Now, you could save those scraps for another project. I'll show you it another day. But until then, for the most part, you can throw it away. You want to try to clean this up as best as you can. But the only problem is you wind up with this like hill with the 90-degree angle. So I like to go through and kind of give it a bit of a beveled edge. I wish there was an easier way to do this. There really kind of isn't, barring, sandpaper or, once again, that floral cutter. That's where that bad boy comes through. So kind of do your best, saw through it. We're not looking for perfection on this particular tutorial, mainly because it's a tutorial. I'll show you how to do something much better down the line, or as with practice, you'll get better at this. Rarely will you get the results that you want if you're only going to take about 5-6 minutes on it. So do your best to get it flat. Once you get the bevel that you're comfortable with, that's where you kind of want to clean up these edges. Try not to get too involved with it because you can spend way too much time just kind of sawing at the ends. Once you're happy with what you have, make sure you put your blades all the way in. Last thing you want is for them to stab you when you're looking. This is where that sandpaper comes in hand. So what you want to do with that sandpaper is you're going to use this to clean up the edges. So kind of fold it into a manageable shape and just give it a nice rub down. Now, what's funny is, as I'm starting here, I'm doing that back and forth motion. You don't want to do that with sandpaper because it's just going to rough it up. You want to just sand in one motion. Don't kind of do that back and forth because it's just going to make it gross. When you do this nice even sanding, you get a nice flat, much more smooth surface. It's a bit more time consuming, but the end results are much better. So as you can see, I use that back and forth motion on the areas that are really rough, and then that solid directionals where I kind of smooth it out and make it much pretty. You can go back and forth, but you kind of want to either go one direction or the other. Just try to avoid that back and forth motion. So after a little bit of love and TLC, you'll eventually wind up with a hill that is kind of smooth and nice and beveled. What I would recommend that you don't see me doing here is kind of make sure you have a mask. Once again, go that same direction, but make sure you have a mask because this foam can be kind of dangerous to breathe in. I have zero regard for my health, so it's just something I don't do. But eventually you're going to get this nice, even, kind of prettier edge. Try not to get too involved in it because you can spend hours here on one piece, but that's not the point when we're trying to do something nice and simple. But you do want to get it nice and clean. So once you have it cleaned, once you're happy with it, don't worry about that sandpaper, it's pretty cheap. We can get to the painting part. So the painting part's also really simple. You want to make sure you take your craft glue, give it a nice shake, because God knows when the last time you used it was. Once you got it nice and shake it up, use a little paper plate, plastic bowl, whatever. Be generous with it. It's cheap. The bottle's like $2, Find your nice little cheap brush. Make sure it's nice and clean. You don't want to get any dust in here. And then just start slathering that paint on it, man. Just make sure you get a nice thick coat. Because right about here, this is where you're going to want it to be a good, nice layer. Because if you do plan on hitting it with spray paint or the like afterwards, that spray paint will eat through that foam. So the better of a layer, the more of a protective surface you're going to have. So do your best to get a nice, even coat of paint all over this thing. Take your time, but don't worry about it being too perfect because, there's not much to it. So yeah, bam, we're done. We have a nice green hill. It's perfectly tabletop ready. It's going to add some depth. If you want to add some kind of flock to it on top, or you want to go back and you want to fill in these gaps, that's totally up to you. But the way it is now, I think this is perfectly acceptable for your basic home tabletop. So, like I said, it's a really basic, simple process. You want to make sure you cut out your thing, get your hill the shape the way you want it, and then, just make sure you get a good even coat of paint that's going to match your board. Whether you decide to add any flock or any character or any depth or detail, that is 100% up to you. This is your project. Be as detailed or as lack of as you want to. What the main point of this is to keep your board from being completely flat and bland. So at the end of the day, I hope I kind of showed you how to make a basic hill and you get what you want out of it. And I hope this kind of adds some depth to your own home table and the gaming guys that you play with. Other than that, you guys have a good day and I hope you have some fun.